Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention. Good evening and welcome to the Marian Miner Cook Athenaeum. My name is Jacob Smagula, and I'm one of your 4 Athenaeum Fellows for this year. Tonight, we turn our attention to Lebanon, a country whose history has been defined by political instability, sectarian divisions, and external influence. With the election of a new president, Lebanon faces yet another turning point. Will the country finally break free from decades of turmoil, or will unresolved tensions, especially those surrounding Hezbollah's role in national security, lead to yet another cycle of unrest? As popular demands to disarm Hezbollah grow louder and regional instability continues, Lebanon's future remains uncertain. To help us navigate this complex political landscape, we are fortunate tonight to have Professor Hisham Bou-Nassif, the Weinberg Associate Professor for International Relations and the Middle East at Claremont McKenna College here tonight. Professor Nassif is a distinguished scholar of Middle Eastern politics, authoritarianism, and civil military relations. His expertise is built on both rigorous academic research and first-hand experience, having worked as a journalist in Lebanon before pursuing his graduate studies in the United States. Professor Bou-Nassif holds a PhD in political science from Indiana University and a research doctorate from the Holy Spirit University of Kazakh, an MA in political science and government from the St. Joseph University of Beirut, and a master's degree in public law. His scholarship includes Endgames, Military Response to Protest in Arab Autocracies, published by the Cambridge University Press, as well as numerous peer-reviewed articles on military politics and authoritarian regimes. He is currently working on a second book examining US policy in the Middle East during the Reagan administration. Fluent in Arabic, English, and French, Professor Bou-Nassif brings a global perspective to his work, drawing from extensive field research across the Middle East. Tonight's presentation is part of Middle East What Now series, co-sponsored by the President's Leadership Fund. And as always, we ask you to please silence your cell phones and give your full attention to our speaker. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Hisham Bou-Nassif.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for this presentation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Priya, for giving me this opportunity to talk about Lebanon. Thank you, our intrepid leader in the political science department, my colleague, John. Thank you to all the students who are present. It's a really nice opportunity. A lot is happening in Lebanon, and there's so much to talk about. I'll try to keep it brief, hopefully 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes, and then I'll be more than happy taking all your questions. All right. The events unfolding in the Middle East since the October 7 attacks in Gaza in 2023 have upended the status quo in the region. By virtue of Hezbollah's decision to enter the fray on the side of Hamas, Lebanon was yet again thrown against its will in a foreign conflict. But whatever calculations Hezbollah may have made before joining Hamas's fight against Israel, the result has been an Israeli triumph and a defeat of biblical proportion inflicted upon the militant Shia organization. The current situation in Lebanon, which I will discuss in this talk, stems directly from the latest round of conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, and from the latter's defeat in it. Until the eve of October 7, and for 2 decades before that, the political order in Lebanon had rested upon 2 pillars. 1, Iranian overlordship over Lebanon's foreign policy, and 2, Hezbollah's control of the Lebanese state, and by extension, Shia supremacy over the other components of Lebanese society, namely the Christians and the Sunnis. It is inevitable thus that talk about Hezbollah be central in any discussion of Lebanon. Simply put, at least until November 2024, Hezbollah was a central player in the Lebanese drama. And it is no exaggeration to say that for the last 2 decades, Lebanese politics essentially were basically whatever Hezbollah did and how its opponents in Lebanon responded. As I mentioned previously, Hezbollah chose to join Hamas's attack on Israel and badly miscalculated in a series of stunning military successes, the most spectacular of which are perhaps the pager attacks on September 17, 2024. Israel destroyed the military, ideological, and perhaps more importantly, psychological basis of Hezbollah's supremacy in Lebanon. Indeed, Israel intensified its attacks against Hezbollah in September 2024. And by November 2024, when a ceasefire agreement was reached, Hezbollah had lost its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, almost all of its senior field commanders, thousands of fighters, and most of its arsenal. In addition, thousands of Lebanese Shia civilians were killed or injured, and hundreds of thousands of Shia fled from the zone of conflict to become essentially refugees within Lebanon. Hezbollah's bombastic claims about protecting Lebanon, invading Israel, liberating Galilee, i.e. northern Israel, of bombing Tel Aviv, and indeed of wiping Israel off the map, were put to the acid test of battle and proved vacuous. The Shia organization was unable to inflict serious damage on Israel and also failed to protect its own constituency of Lebanese Shia civilians. Furthermore, the Islamic Republic of Iran proved unable to intervene effectively to deter Israel, thus earning an image of paper tiger, which has severely undermined its credibility in Lebanon and in the region. And as if these mind-boggling events were not enough to change the political equation in Lebanon and the Middle East dramatically, the Syrian regime, long a junior ally of Iran, providing a land bridge to Lebanon, collapsed in December 2024. Lebanon and Syria are now facing the most dramatic changes in their politics and intersectarian relations in the last 50 years. The Iranian order is no more. A new order is yet to be established. And Gramsci's oft-cited quote inevitably comes to mind here. The old is dying, the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Now, it goes beyond the limits of this talk to give a detailed description of the long and troubled history of intersectarian relations in Lebanon. However, before I dig into the details of the current political situation in Beirut, it is important to keep in mind three basics pertaining to Lebanon. One, Lebanese politics are in effect a never-ending ethnic conflict between its sectarian groups, the most influential of which are the Christians, the Sunnis, and the Shia. A classic mistake Western observers of Lebanese politics make is using theoretical lenses drawn from the Western political tradition, such as left and right or liberal and conservative, to analyze Lebanon. Analytical lenses we choose to understand a country or a situation matter, and these are the wrong tools to use in the case of Lebanon. There are, of course, liberal Lebanese citizens, just as there are Lebanese conservatives. There are rich Lebanese, middle-class Lebanese, and poor Lebanese. There are Lebanese who live in the countryside and others who dwell in cities. And yet, the major background against which Lebanese politics unfold does not pertain to class, ideological convictions, or regional parochialism, but very much to sectarian identity. Major leaders in Lebanon become major leaders because they have a sectarian popular power base. Major Lebanese political parties are sectarian political parties, so essentially Christian parties, Sunni parties, Shia parties, and there's a small community, an offshoot sect of Shia Islam, the Druze. There's also a Druze party. During the Lebanese Civil War between 1975 and 1990, the major Lebanese militia were built around sectarian affiliation. Ignoring this fundamental notion of Lebanese politics inevitably leads to misunderstandings and error in judgments. If somebody is interested in studying how the New York Times or how Le Monde was covering the Lebanese Civil War, you will find a lot of talk about left versus right, and something to that extent. That's a major misunderstanding of Lebanon. It's not left versus right. It's basically an ethnic conflict between various communal parties. Two, so the first rule to understand Lebanon, or to understand the politics of Lebanon, is taken into consideration that politics is essentially a never-ending ethnic conflict between groups that do not like one another. The second idea or lens that we need to use is this. It is customary in Lebanese politics for the competing sectarian groups to appeal to external powers, whether they be regional or international, to intervene in Lebanese affairs in order to change the local correlation of forces in their favor. Historically, the Lebanese Christians look west. This was already true during the Crusades, when Christians dwelling in Mount Lebanon welcomed the Crusaders as liberators from Muslim yoke and fought along their side. The Lebanese Sunnis look toward the neighboring Arab world and identify with its causes, namely Palestine. As for the Shia, their historical relations with Iran goes back at least to the 16th century, when imams and scholars traveled from the Shia hinterland in Lebanon to help the Safavids convert Iran to Shiism. 3. The ebb and flow of local politics in Lebanon is extremely sensitive to the fortunes of external patrons of various Lebanese communities. For instance, when France lost to Germany on the European battlefield during the Second World War, she became vulnerable to British pressure in the Levant that eventually forced her out of Lebanon and Syria. That, in effect, created a new configuration of power, unfavorable to the pro-French Christians in Lebanon and the pro-French Alawis in Syria. The Alawis are an offshoot sect of Shia Islam. And amenable to the anti-French Sunnis in both countries, who had been mobilizing to push France out of Lebanon and Syria since the French mandate was established in both countries in 1920. Decades later, the rise of Iranian influence in the Middle East in the wake of Khomeini's Islamic Revolution of 1979 upended the intercommunitarian status quo throughout the region and paved the way to unprecedented Shia empowerment in the Middle East. All these three factors: 1, that Lebanese politics are shaped by ethnic conflict; 2, that ethnic conflict invites foreign intervention in Lebanese affairs; and 3, that the dynamics of internal ethnic conflict are structured by the dynamics of regional and international affairs, are important to understand the current situation in Lebanon and to reflect upon its future possibilities. When the Lebanese civil war ended in 1990, Lebanon became a de facto satellite state of the Syrian/Iranian axis in the Middle East. I have mentioned already that Iran is Shia, but in truth, it is more than that. Iran is the heartland, the very core of Shia Islam, by virtue of various factors, including its demographic weight, its influence as a center of clerical Shia learning, its ancient prestige, and its interventionist foreign policy. The influence of Iran and of its Syrian ally over Lebanon reshaped the Lebanese intersectarian balance of power after the end of the Lebanese civil war. A new naturalization law gave Lebanese citizenship to hundreds of thousands of people, a large part of whom were Shia Muslims. The new demographic configuration of the country made the Christian community, previously the largest in Lebanon, a minority, and boosted Muslim and specifically Shia weight in the composition of Lebanese society. On the other hand, the post-1990 electoral laws were all manufactured to strengthen the hand of the major Shia parties of Lebanon. Tens of thousands of young Shia men and women were absorbed into an ever-sprawling and notoriously inefficient Lebanese public sector. Public spending favored the Shia region, especially in the Lebanese south, to the extent that frustrated voices from other communities began describing the situation as one driven by internal colonialism operating in favor of Iran's local Shia clients. Equally important, while the Christian militias, which were very hostile to both Iran and Syria during the Lebanese civil war, were disarmed after the war, Hezbollah was not. Indeed, Hezbollah literally means the party of God. Indeed, Hezbollah was allowed to grow under Syrian and especially Iranian patronage. It is estimated that Iran may have spent up to $1 billion per year in support of Hezbollah's military and civilian wings over the last decades. The number is difficult to check, but it is certain that thousands of Shia men and women are employed in Hezbollah's military, political, and social organizations. Specifically, as Hezbollah turned into a state within the Lebanese state, it is estimated that 50,000 Shia families have become financially dependent on jobs provided by Hezbollah. In addition to funds, Iran provided an arsenal of missiles and various kinds of heavy weaponry. Hezbollah became the most powerful non-governmental military organization in the world, one perhaps better armed than the Lebanese military itself. Granted, that's not a big achievement, but still, that counts for something. In brief, what began as a ragtag group of fundamentalists in the early 1980s, used by Iran to attack the American Marines in Beirut in 1983, then to abduct, torture, and kill various Western hostages, especially academics and journalists, had become, a few decades later, a state within the state in Lebanon, and indeed, a counter-society within Lebanese society, in the sense that, and I think this is the most interesting about Hezbollah, in the sense that one could be born to parents working for Hezbollah, be educated in schools run by Hezbollah, get a job at one of Hezbollah's institutions, marry a partner who is also a Hezbollah supporter, live in neighborhoods controlled by Hezbollah, go to hospitals directed by Hezbollah, shop at supermarkets run by Hezbollah, and of course, die fighting for Hezbollah. So you can go from the moment you are born to the moment you die. You go through all your life as a school, as somebody in the workforce, and of course as a militant, all through Hezbollah institutions and neighborhoods. It was not original in the history of the Lebanese Republic that a major party be a strictly sectarian organization. As mentioned previously, all major Lebanese parties are centered around a single communitarian group. Nor was it exceptional that Hezbollah would maintain ties with a foreign power. What is different in Hezbollah's case in comparison with the other major Lebanese players is fivefold. First, whereas other Lebanese parties are sectarian but non-religious, in the sense that they do not maintain projects to establish neither a Christian nor a Muslim theocracy in Lebanon, Hezbollah espouses openly the program of transforming Lebanon into an Iranian-style Islamic Shia republic. Here we need to make a distinction between a religious fundamentalist party and a sectarian party. You can be sectarian and secular at the same time, or you could be sectarian and religious and fundamentalist. In the case of Hezbollah, we're talking about a party that is strictly Shia, but also one that espouses a program of establishing an Islamic republic. There are other parties who are also strictly Shia, but do not have such a program. So this is something very specific to Hezbollah. So this is the first specificity when it comes to Hezbollah. They espouse openly a program of transforming Lebanon into a theocracy, into a Shia theocracy. Now, since the Shia are only 1/3 of the population, and the Christians and Sunni form roughly the rest of the Lebanese population, many fear that Hezbollah in effect intends to push as many Christians and Sunnis away from Lebanon until its ideological project becomes feasible. 2, whereas other forces maintain instrumentalist relations with foreign powers that can be broken or changed according to circumstances and interests, Hezbollah's links with Iran are ideological. Hassan Nasrallah, the late leader of Hezbollah, acknowledged publicly that Hezbollah's support, money, and guidance comes from Iran, and that he considers himself to be a soldier in the army of the Wali al-Faqih. The Wali al-Faqih is essentially, or it means, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So Imam Khamenei. 3, until the war with Israel decimated Hezbollah's top ranks, political assassinations in the last 20 years targeted strictly opponents of Hezbollah, including a prime minister of Lebanon, various MPs, journalists, and intellectuals, some of whom happen to be Shia opponents of the Party of God. Political assassinations, intimidations, open threats, all directed at Hezbollah's opponents, have become, under Hezbollah's ascendancy in the last 20 years, the new normal in a country that was once considered to be the only democracy and free society in the Arab world. 4, Hezbollah intervened directly to fight Iran's regional wars on behalf of its handlers in Tehran, irrespective of what the Lebanese thought about it. So in addition to fighting the Israelis on behalf of the Iranians, during the Syrian civil war that began in 2011, Hezbollah fought along the forces of the Assad regime and became involved in various crimes against humanity, including, most infamously, starving Sunni civilians to death in the Syrian city of Madaya. Hezbollah also have footprints helping the Houthis in Yemen and the so-called Popular Mobilization Shia militias in Iraq. Essentially, Hezbollah served in the last 2 decades as the backbone of the Iranian-led Shia International, operating in various Middle East countries. 5, Hezbollah protected the corrupt political elite that drove the Lebanese economy to collapse in 2019, when the Lebanese currency lost 95% of its value, and Lebanon's GDP plummeted from 52 billion in 2019 to 23 billion in 2021. The Faustian deal between Hezbollah and Lebanon's oligarchs was straightforward. Hezbollah turned a blind eye to what could be called Grand Theft Lebanon, i.e. the organized plundering of the country by a cast of politicians operating essentially as organized crime. And they, in exchange, They, in exchange, legitimized Hezbollah's arms under the guise of fighting Israel, although Israel withdrew from Lebanon 25 years ago in 2000. Now, considering the above, an uninformed observer may be forgiven to expect Shia voters in Lebanon to turn against Hezbollah, considering everything that has happened to the country. But that would be underestimating the power of in-group solidarity and deep mistrust between the peoples of the Lebanese people. Irrespective of whatever Hezbollah did, the organization was still perceived as a source of protection, empowerment, and pride by most Lebanese Shia. In the last legislative elections in 2022, 95% of Shia voters supported Hezbollah and its allies. By contrast, a large majority of Christians and Sunnis voted for parties openly hostile to Hezbollah. The Hezbollah-induced polarization of Lebanese society made the Lebanese political system, simply put, unworkable. Indeed, for the last 20 years, presidential elections in Lebanon became akin to political C-section operations, requiring each time heavy foreign interventions and long periods of presidential vacancies during which Lebanon would, simply put, operate without a president at the top. Operate. Meanwhile, the negotiations to form governmental coalitions would sometimes go on for months. This is the case currently, by the way. Eventually, when after long labor, governments were formed, they were invariably heteroclite assemblies of politicians who disagreed on everything except on one thing, plundering what could be plundered from the exhausted Lebanese treasury before a new class of rapacious vultures could take its turn. This has been the sorry, indeed tragic situation in Lebanon until Hezbollah in effect surrendered to Israel in November 2024. So, where do we go from here? First, it is important to acknowledge that Hezbollah is seriously weakened, but not totally defeated. As mentioned previously, thousands of its fighters are dead or wounded, but it is estimated that the so-called Party of God may still have 10,000 fighters under its command. Most of its arsenal is gone, but enough medium and light weapons remain to keep Hezbollah as something more than just another political party in Lebanon. Think about it this way. While Hezbollah has become too weak to seriously threaten Israel, it remains strong enough to threaten its opponents in Lebanon. Furthermore, whether the era of Hezbollah using assassinations as just another tool of doing politics and business in Lebanon is bygone remains to be seen. There are reasons to believe that precisely because it has gotten weaker, the organization may become even more aggressive. The economic/clientelist dimension of politics is important to pinpoint here. Until recently, Hezbollah funded itself via Iranian support and the opioid trade in Lebanon and Syria, in which it was heavily invested. But Iran is struggling economically. Also, Hezbollah's mediocre military performance may push its Iranian handlers to question the value of their investment. Whether Iran still has the will and the capacity to keep funding Hezbollah at the same levels of old remains to be seen. Furthermore, Syria now is in hands hostile to Hezbollah, and the Syria-centered opioid trade has stopped in the wake of the breakdown of the Assad regime. Both factors, i.e. Iran's economic struggles and the end of drug money, have thrown Hezbollah into an unprecedented economic crisis at a time when billions of dollars are needed to reconstruct the Shia areas damaged by Israeli bombing and to support the thousands of families whose breadwinners died fighting for Hezbollah or have become incapacitated. One obvious source of financial replacement is the Lebanese treasury. This will be especially true if Arab and international donors honor their promises to help Lebanon recover from the war. Simply put, should billions find their way again to Lebanese coffers, then the political vultures of old will be hovering above them. Hezbollah, of course, has more reasons than any other force in Lebanon to control the money in order to appease its constituency in the wake of the debacle. Essentially, Hezbollah currently leaves Lebanon facing two dark scenarios. Either reconstruction money will not come, because countries which could help Lebanon, think Saudi Arabia, for instance, have no interest in supporting a state still controlled by the militant organization. In this case, the Lebanese economy will be left to fester under the intertwined dynamics of the cost of war, corruption, and financial collapse. Alternatively, by some miracle, money will come indeed to Beirut, only to be embezzled in the usual way and siphoned off by Hezbollah and its allies. Should this scenario materialize, the Lebanese economy will fail to recover, and Lebanon will continue to be looked upon as essentially a failed state ruled by an alliance of corrupt politicians and an extremist militia. Consequently, Lebanon will continue to suffer, the Lebanese brain drain will persist and perhaps intensify, and the decades-old Lebanese descent into hell will continue. This gloomy scenario, however, while a real possibility, is not inevitable. It is important to keep in mind that even at the height of Hezbollah's power over Lebanon, influential Lebanese forces pushed back against it, mainly, though by no means exclusively, in the Christian community. This is precisely because not all the Lebanese political class surrendered to Hezbollah that the Shia organization resorted to so many assassinations to break the will of its opponents. In January 2025, only a few weeks ago, a new president was elected almost 2 years after the tenure of the last president had ended. The new president, General Joseph Aoun, previously was the commander of the Lebanese army and is no friend of Hezbollah. In his first speech to the Lebanese as president, General Aoun promised that the state will no longer tolerate any other organization bearing arms in Lebanon save the Lebanese army. This was a blunt rejection of Hezbollah's pretensions to pose as a protector of Lebanon alongside and indeed above the Lebanese state. A prime minister was also designated, and again, the new PM, Mr. Nawaf Salam, is not a Hezbollah ally. If we add to this that Hezbollah's opponents have a relative majority in the Lebanese parliament, and that the Lebanese military, while no doubt infiltrated by officers and soldiers who are loyal to Hezbollah, the Lebanese army nonetheless remains politically neutral. So if we take all these considerations, if we take all this into consideration, a president that is not a friend of Hezbollah, a PM that is not a friend of Hezbollah, a majority in the parliament that is not a friend of Hezbollah, and the Lebanese military that is also not a friend of Hezbollah and by and large politically neutral, then perhaps, just perhaps, the possibilities of Lebanese recovery become clearer to mind. Note that Israel still occupies, after the last war, parts of the Lebanese south to this day, and that Hezbollah's base of displaced villagers is eager to return to their villages in the south and to rebuild. Note also that an American military delegation is currently in Beirut and is tasked with the mission of overseeing the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah and the disarming of the Shia organization. Should this be accomplished, then again, perhaps, just perhaps, Lebanon has a chance after all. I would like to end with two final thoughts. The first on American policy toward Lebanon, and the second on the experience of multicultural societies in the Middle East, of which Lebanon is an example. Regarding the first, the ebb and flow of American policy in Lebanon can be summarized as follows. Decades of neglect, leaving Lebanon to fester, followed by brief periods of intense engagement when Lebanese problems become so big that they would threaten American interests in the Middle East. In the 1940s, the US helped the UK to push France out of Lebanon, and then essentially forgot about the country, about Lebanon, until President Eisenhower sent 10,000 Marines to Beirut in 1958 to defend the pro-American regime there against the pro-Soviet opposition. In the 1960s and the 1970s, Lebanon again fell into American oblivion until President Reagan was forced to send the Marines to Beirut in 1982 in the wake of the Israeli invasion that year. After the debacle of the Marines in 1983, America retreated from Lebanon for 3 decades until President George W. Bush chose to punish Syria for its anti-American activities in Iraq by forcing it out of Lebanon in 2005. And then again, Lebanon was left for Hezbollah to rule until the last war between Israel and Hezbollah forced America to re-engage. Now, that America is not eager to involve herself in Lebanon is actually understandable for 2 reasons. One, the country is not important strategically, has no oil reserves, and is not in any way an asset, whether during the Cold War or after the Cold War. To be sure, American missionaries founded in Beirut in the 19th century the Protestant College, which later became the American University of Beirut, AUB, arguably the most prestigious university in the Arab world to this day. The American embassy in Beirut keeps a sympathetic eye on AUB, but that does not amount to a serious interest in Lebanon. 2, the second reason why America is not in a rush to engage in Lebanon, Lebanon seems for American policymakers incomprehensible. Guess what? Lebanon seems for this Lebanese a lot of time incomprehensible as well. So I'm not truly blaming the Lebanese, but the American policymakers. So Lebanon seems for American policymakers incomprehensible and forever turbulent. Thus, America has treated Lebanon as a problem to be avoided rather than an opportunity to invest in. Now, as much as I personally hate to admit it, this is not wrong. Foreign policy should be about the pursuits of national interests. And simply put, America has no major national interest in Lebanon. That said, and again, whenever Lebanon is left to fester, the country becomes a nuisance to whatever plans Americans have for the Middle East, and a hub of dangerous anti-American organizations, of which Hezbollah is only the latest and most dangerous example. After almost a century of intermittent American interest in Lebanon, perhaps a middle way can and indeed should be reached. Neither undue American involvement in Lebanese affairs, because time and energy can be better spent elsewhere. That's just a fact. But nor complete neglect, leaving Lebanon as a prey for radical forces, which then use it to attack Israel, which then retaliates, thus forcing America to intervene in order to avoid an unwanted conflagration in the Middle East. My point here is simple. It does not matter that America is not interested in Lebanon. Lebanon is interested in America. In its bizarre way, it is. And DC would be wise to give the country at least a modicum of attention. Now, what would that mean in the current situation? In the current situation, this means helping the Lebanese military to disarm Hezbollah completely, and also imposing sanction on any Lebanese official preventing the complete demilitarization of Hezbollah. Furthermore, the US should push Lebanon to sign a peace treaty with Israel. As I mentioned previously, Israel retreated from Lebanon in 2000, and contra cliches and facile conspiracy theories, Israel has no territorial ambition in Lebanon. There is absolutely no reason why the 2 countries, Lebanon and Israel, cannot be at peace, especially now that the Abraham Accords have added the Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco to other Arab countries that have already made peace with Israel, notably Egypt and Jordan. It should be remembered in this regard that Palestinian guerrillas paved the way to the Lebanese civil war in 1975 when they used Lebanon as a launching pad against Israel, and thus pushed Lebanon into an abyss it has yet to emerge from 5 decades later. And later on, Hezbollah also used the Lebanese territory to attack Israel, with the devastating consequences that we know. Simply put, for the last 50 years, the alibi of the struggle against the Zionist enemy has been the excuse and the alibi that every radical organization seeking to wreak havoc in Lebanon has used in order to control the country and involve it against its will in its fight against Israel. If Lebanon is to recover, the southern front with Israel should be closed for good. And that means a peace treaty between the two countries, which America, and only America, can deliver if some attention is finally given to Lebanon, in addition to, of course, making Gaza great again, which apparently is is going to happen soon. On the long run, however, Lebanon needs more than disarming Hezbollah and peace with Israel, important as these issues may be. As I mentioned previously in a different talk in this very room, the fundamental problem of Lebanon is that it is a country that forced together populations with different identities and aspirations. Although these populations are united by a common language, they are separated by centuries of mutual suspicions and carnage. They have very different understanding of history, of who is the enemy of Lebanon, and of who is the friend of Lebanon, of who is the hero in the history of Lebanon, and of who is the traitor in the history of Lebanon, and so on. It was not inevitable that Lebanon be established within its current borders. Nor was it inevitable, by the way, that the Syrian Alawis be forced to be part of a Sunni-dominated Syria. Nor was it inevitable that Kurds be forced to join the Arab-controlled Iraq. The history of the Levant is not violent because people in the region are psychopaths who enjoy bloodshed. The Levant is violent because human beings seek dignity. And no dignity can be found when groups are forced to live as second-class citizens in their own land. The Christians in Lebanon have fought ferociously during the war because they reject the himitude, i.e., the second-class status that Islam imposes on non-Muslims in Muslim-controlled societies. The Kurds in Iraq and Syria have rejected being Arabites. Sunnis in Syria under the Assad regime refuse to be controlled by Alawis. And now that the Assad regime is gone, Alawis, Druze, Christians, and Kurds in Syria are publicly rejecting being controlled by Sunnis. Something needs to be done to end this untenable embrace between groups that do not like each other in Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. Federalism should be considered. And if federalism fails, allowing every group to self-govern, then partition should be considered as well. Ultimately, nationalisms and patriotisms are mere abstractions, and the lives of human beings are always more important than abstractions. In effect, the Lebanese, the Syrians, and the Iraqis are more important than the idea of Lebanon, the idea of Syria, and the idea of Iraq. If the price of keeping these countries united is to keep their people suffering forever in never-ending civil wars and never-ending ethnic conflict traps, then the price is too big and not worth paying. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that talk. It was just jam-packed with information. It was incredible. So now we move on to the Q&A portion of the evening. If you have a question, we invite you to come up to one of the two microphones. Please say your first and last name, your school, your major, and then share your question. If you see that somebody's already up at the mic, we ask that you please line up on the side.
Thank you, Professor Bonasif.
You're welcome.
I was curious. I know that in sort of the later part of the 20th century, Pakistan tried to project its power across the Middle East as sort of the Sunni power in the region, and more recently, Saudi Arabia tried to do the same. Neither of which really came to very much in the face of particularly Iranian Shia success and their militias. And more recently, however, Israel has had its success in beating back Iranian aggression. I'm curious if, with Turkey recently having supported successfully Azerbaijani aggression against Armenia, as well as the overthrow of the Assad regime by HTS and Abu Muhammad al-Julani, if you think that Turkey might attempt to project itself as a Sunni power in the Middle East and take that mantle from Saudi Arabia or other challengers, and particularly how that might affect the plight or the wishes of the Sunni minority in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
excellent question. Yes, Turkey essentially has scored some important points because the militias that toppled the Assad regime are Turkish-backed militias. Now, of course, the Saudis did not lose any time reminding the Syrians that, yes, the Turks can give you weapons, but if you want to rebuild your country, you need money, and that the Turks cannot provide. This is where we come in. So it's also important to keep in mind that the first visit by the new president of Syria, he's the de facto leader of Syria, he did not go to Turkey. He went to Saudi Arabia. So while granted, Iran has suffered immensely in Syria and lost its Syrian base, and while granted, the current militias/army in control, I mean, they are infiltrated by the Turkish intelligence. They are trained by the so Turkey has an advantage now in Syria. But because of the financial influence of Saudi Arabia, I doubt that Turkey will become the ultimate master of Syria. So perhaps Syria could become a condominium between Turkey and Syria. That could possibly happen. Now, something else I would like to add. I don't think there's a big appetite in the Arab world to a renewed Ottoman domination, right? Religion matters a lot to shape identity. But language, ethnicity, they matter as well. So there is a sense that the Turks, they're just not us. Why do you think Iran suffered so much? I mean, Iran tried to play the card of Islam and tried to be, more pro-Palestinian than the rest of the Arabs, and yet Iran remained the ultimate other, not just because it's Shia, also because it's Persian, right? So however much the Turks try to play their hand, they are going to get some influence, and they are getting some influence, but there will always be a rejection that they are not us, whereas, the Saudis do not suffer from that disadvantage.
If not Turkey, where do you think Lebanese Sunnis might look for foreign support?
I mean, they don't, if you're talking about, so all this is about Syria. When it comes to the Lebanese Sunnis, they have no appetite at all for any Turkish intervention. Some Lebanese Sunni, like many Lebanese, have suffered enough. And now some of them, not all, would say, I don't want anybody to intervene in my country, thank you very much. And the others who would play the traditional game, Lebanese game, of inviting somebody in to get an advantage over your enemies in Lebanon, would look towards Saudi Arabia, not toward the Turks. The Turks remain the other. And the memories of the Ottoman Empire are not exactly, and not just for the Armenians. And so there are a lot of even Sunni Muslims who do not look very warmly on Turkey coming back in. Saudi Arabia could play a role, and eventually, not anytime soon, if Egypt, and that's a big if the Egyptian economy recovers, I would say the natural leader of the Arab world would not even be Saudi Arabia, would be Egypt. But at this point, it's not going to happen because Egypt does not have, it has a lot of ambition, it just doesn't have the money behind it. And
Thank you.
That's always the problem. You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Leo. Thank you for talking with us today. My question concerns your point about the possibility of a peace deal with Israel.
Yeah.
In many Arab countries, opposition to Israel is maybe the uniting factor.
Yeah.
Is the same true in Lebanon, or are there pockets of the population that might be receptive?
Yeah, that's another good question. No, it's not the same in Lebanon. Listen, the Lebanese Christians historically played a very big role. One could say a dominant role in the politics of Lebanon. And the Lebanese Christians have a sense that we are a non-Muslim, Western-oriented minority. The Israelis are a non-Muslim, Western-oriented minority within the Middle East. So they are kind of like natural allies. There's no hatred. Not only there's no hatred, but during the war, when the Christians were essentially fighting the Palestinian militias, they got help from Israel. So at least from that perspective, I don't see Christians rejecting that or being like a uniting factor. No. There's another small community which is an offshoot sect of Shia Islam, the Druze. The Druze are also present in Israel, and they are well treated in Israel, and they get to reach really high places in the Israeli army. And I would say most of the Lebanese Druze would actually accept it eagerly. And now, the true problem historically came from the Sunni and Shia side of Lebanese society. But at this point, hey, if Saudi Arabia herself is in talks with Israel, then if the Emirates have signed a peace. I said in this talk that historically the Lebanese Sunnis look to the Arab world for guidance. Look at the Arab world. I mean, Egypt is at peace with Israel, right? The biggest Arab country is at peace with Israel. Jordan is at peace with Israel. The Emirates, same. Morocco, Sudan, Bahrain. If only Saudi Arabia would sign that peace treaty with the Israelis, then even the Lebanese Sunnis will no longer object. I think at this point, even at this point, a majority of Lebanese are completely sick of the war with Israel. So I should tell you this. Lebanon has already a treaty, a ceasefire, signed with Israel in 1949. So almost all the Lebanese, except of Hezbollah, would say, let's just go back to the ceasefire agreement. And by the ceasefire agreement, Lebanon is obliged not to attack Israel and vice versa. So already we have a formula that could somewhat work. My personal ambition is to upgrade it, so to speak. But already what we have, if it gets applied, already it's not bad. I am hoping, again, the last obstacle would be the Saudi obstacle. If the Saudis would sign that peace treaty, then I think Lebanon would be the next in line. Of course, the Saudis are saying we are ready, but we need some kind of solution for the Palestinians, and I mean, I don't know where this is going to head. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for speaking with us today. My name is Annie Bernstein. I'm a sophomore at CMC studying international relations. So if when and/or because federalism has typically failed in the Middle East,
Yeah.
and in the Levant, do you believe that partition is the ultimate solution for these failed states? And do you believe that this could prevent Iran from having such a stronghold across the Middle East?
Yeah, excellent question, Annie. So there's only one federal state in the Arab world. It so happens to be the most successful state in the Arab world, the Emirates, right? So the Emirates, meaning Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Some of you may get jobs after you graduate from there. Why not? In Dubai, it's a beautiful city. So I wouldn't say federalism has failed in the Middle East. The only country that has tried federalism is a country that is thriving. It hadn't been tried, so we don't know if it will fail. What we do know is that the centralized system of governments essentially has put one community against the other community, right? If money is in the center, if the tax money goes to the center, then everybody wants to control the center to control the tax money, right? If you get to distribute the money on various groups and various regions, then perhaps this life or death struggle to control Damascus or to control Beirut or to control Baghdad, you won't have reasons to do that. So at least in theory, federalism could work. Now you ask me, let us say it is tried and it failed. I would say, I mean, the most important thing is that Iraqis no longer kill Iraqis, and Syrians no longer kill Syrians, and Lebanese no longer kill Lebanese. And if, simply put, after 100 years of creating these new countries in the post-Ottoman world, if they simply do not work, if simply the divide line between Kurds and Arabs is too strong to be somehow diluted by Iraqi nationalism, then, I mean, why keep Iraq united? Speaking of which, by the way, in 2016, there was a referendum in Iraqi Kurdistan, and 90% of Kurds voted to become independent, right? Of course, the international community refused to honor and respect the legitimate, in my mind, Kurdish national aspirations. So to answer your question, yes, if federalism is tried, and if it fails, should we think beyond federalism? Personally, I mean, I don't know about you, I'm not spending my nights shedding tears because Czechoslovakia is no longer a unified country. So what? I mean, so what, right? Cyprus is divided between, a Greek Christian part of the island and a Turkish Muslim part of the island. If the alternative to that is keeping Cyprus united, and then every 10, 15, 20 years you have people slaughtering one another, then what for? So, I mean, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Professor.
Hey.
My name is Ellie Lerner. I'm a CMC senior studying government. So my question for you is, after Nasrallah's death, the New York Times ran a very sympathetic obituary about him. And we've even seen like Hezbollah flags waved at college campuses across the country.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, why you think there is sympathy for Hezbollah, or how do you think Hezbollah features into the Western imagination?
You don't ask easy questions, do you? Okay, that's another excellent question. Listen, I mean, there are multiple reasons for why this is happening. One of which, one that means personally to me, is the absolute failure of the field of Middle East studies in this country. It happened that I went to, MESA, Middle East Studies Association's meetings, and in my mind, I would wonder, had I been at the Hamas meeting, would I hear less nonsense than in that meeting? And so that's one reason. I mean, the person who wrote the article in the New York Times, I would assume and hope that that's someone who went to a college and has a degree before getting a job at the New York Times. The question is, what did he learn or she learn in that college? And I'll take a guess. What he or she learned is this: America is evil. Anything that is anti-American is by definition good. Hezbollah is anti-American, then Hezbollah is good. I mean, it's as simple as that. So if this is how you've been taught, then you would end up writing such a documentary. Forgive me, such a article. So I think this is the reason why. The problem here is if you consider that anything that is anti-imperialist is by definition good, then the Taliban are excellent. I'm sure Afghani women currently are very, very happy that the imperialist occupation is no longer in Afghanistan and the intrepid resistance has won, because that made life incredibly good for Afghani women, right? Of course, that's not the case, right? But you could argue that at the end of the day, America was a foreign power occupying Afghanistan, and the Taliban are from Afghanistan. So that makes America good, America bad, the Taliban good. You can make the very same argument for Hezbollah, right? I mean, they are fighting the Americans. They pushed back against the Marines. And the Marines were an occupying force, so they killed 241 Marines. That's good, right? And then, even better, they end up fighting the Israelis, and that's good. I know a lot of people who would. I know another actor in history who would have hated that Israel be created, right? Would he be considered? And he was also anti-American. Would he considered like a good guy just because he was? And I mean, this is ideology, essentially. So to answer your question, this is anti-imperialist, left-wing ideology going amok on American campuses. And well, if you get into that cult, you end up writing such an article in the New York Times.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. We're not done yet. I still got my own question. Hello, I'm Jacob Smagula, junior here at CMC.
Hello, James.
Studying government and history. And my question for you is that you've laid out a couple different options for what could happen, but I'm curious what you think will happen. What's the most likely outcome? If you had to predict, what do you think will actually occur in the next?
We train you too well. You ask too smart questions for me to answer. I don't know. I mean, honestly, Lebanon, honestly, when I said that, I don't blame American policymakers for finding Lebanon very difficult. I mean, I too find the country very difficult to predict. What I can tell you this, I mean, let's begin with basics, right? I mean, politics is about the balance of power, right? And you try to see where the correlation of forces is shifted, and then you can perhaps make a prediction. The correlation of forces in the Middle East is shifting more and more against Iran. So that's something to take into consideration. The other thing to take into consideration, Hezbollah has slaughtered Syrians by their thousands. And now Syria is in the hand of the enemies of Hezbollah. So if you have the map in your mind, you'll find Hezbollah essentially in southern Lebanon, right? To the south, the Israelis, not good. To the east, the Syrians, not good. To the north, the Christians and the Sunnis, also not good from Hezbollah's perspective. So I want to think that considering the above, Hezbollah will accept to become just another party in Lebanon and play the games of politics in Lebanon. In fact, if you take every single material factor currently at play, you would say that's its only option. The problem, we're talking about people so ideologically that what may be for you and I logical or the logical thing to do may not necessarily be. So their logic is a specific kind of logic, right? Like when when you do not, I mean, people who did 9/11, in their minds, they're like good people serving Allah, right? That's a kind of logic that's very different from another kind of. So in my mind, in my logic, look, you've lost the war with Israel. You have no hope of winning. The Syrians hate you. 2/3 of the Lebanese hate you. And Iran is far away now. And anyway, Iran is struggling. And at any moment, I mean, whether the regime is going to survive in Iran or not, that's also a question to think about, right? Under this correlation of force, you have no choice but to surrender what's left of your weapons to the Lebanese state and just become another party in Lebanon. The president of the republic made it clear that there's no alternative to that. The prime minister made it clear that there's no alternative to that. And the biggest parliamentary group in the Lebanese parliament happens to be a Christian group, and they made it very clear that there's no going back. So every single important actor is saying, this is what you have to do. Logically, this is what's going to happen. Possibly this is what's going to happen. I don't see another alternative, but hey, that's Lebanon, again, we're talking about. So if like a week or 2 weeks or a month from now, my prediction becomes, turns out to be wrong, I hope CMC will not revoke my tenure. It's just a very difficult country to think about, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have some time, so another Ath Fellow going to ask a question.
Yes,
My name
sure.
is Melanie Kalla. I'm a senior studying international relations. My question is based off of your response to Ellie's question.
Yeah.
I agree with you that there are flaws in our education and how we teach about the Middle East. You mentioned one flaw. I mean, a million others come to my
Yeah.
mind. But we agree we do not teach on the Middle East as strongly as we should. And people receiving that education or people not receiving that education are going into our foreign policy,
Yeah.
are the leaders of our State Department.
Yeah.
And I think the point that a lot of that education could teach you to be anti-American in the policy isn't helped by the fact that we have very poor foreign policy leaders who are making major blunders in the Middle East. And like blunders, to put it lightly, if you look at Afghanistan, Iraq. So I know the talk is what's next, Lebanon,
Yeah.
but I want your opinion. What's next for U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East?
Other than building condos
Right.
in Gaza. I'm still trying to understand, speaking of incomprehensible things, I'm honestly trying to understand, I mean, how that could work. Listen, okay, so I'll answer this question from the Trump administration foreign policy, what we know about it so far. I think Trump fundamentally does not really care about the Middle East. I see that the priority of the Trump foreign policy has shifted away. And I would say that move away from the Middle East is now at least 15 years old, because I think it began with Barack Obama. I think the last administration that was truly invested, for obvious reasons, in the Middle East would be the George W. Bush administration. And from that time, I think bit by bit, there's a move away from the Middle East. But somehow we keep grabbing America back. So that's the first thing about American foreign policy. It seems to me it's shifting away from the Middle East. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump does not care at all, or there's not going to be a foreign policy in the Middle East. There is going to be an American foreign policy, and I think the pièce de résistance, so to speak, is trying to push the Saudis and the Israelis to sign peace. I think this is where the focus is going to, this is where time and energy is being spent. And I think the stunt about Gaza ultimately is not about Gaza. It's about what we need to do to somehow find a solution for the Saudis and the Israelis to eventually sign a peace treaty. So this is one thing, one priority that Trump clearly has in mind is pushing the Saudis and the Israelis to sign peace. Now, another priority that he has in mind also, and I think he signed an executive order in that regard, reestablishing the maximum pressure policy on Iran. They don't say that publicly, but at least, I mean, I've been following what Senator Marco Rubio would say about the Middle East for years and years. I think he wants regime change in Iran. So I think these would be the 2 or 3 major directions that America will be focused on, at least under this administration, trying to somehow pull off a deal between the Saudis and the Israelis. Trying to, if ultimately, ideally, regime change in Iran, or if not regime change, at least breaking the power of Iran, breaking the hold of Iran, which has been done already by the Israelis, but more can be done. So I think these would be the 2 axes of the current administration in the Middle East.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Sadie Saba. I'm a freshman studying international relations here. And my question for you is, you call for the disarmament of Hezbollah.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of the social services that they offer to the Shia population, which it oftentimes is the poorest community?
Yeah, so it's no longer the poorest community. So historically, what you're saying is right. When Lebanon was created, due to 400 years, remember, the Ottoman Empire was a Sunni empire. Now that war, that empire in the 19th century was at war with the Safavid Empire. Safavid Empire, the current day Iran. Now, if you are at war with the Shia power, and you have within your realm Shia citizens, they're going to suffer. So the Ottomans ended up thinking of their Shia citizens as like a Trojan horse of their Shia rivals in the Middle East. So they mistreated the Shia immensely. And that meant that, no development in their region, they didn't have schools, et cetera, et cetera. So when Lebanon was created, when Grand Liban, Greater Lebanon was created in 1920, it inherited from the Ottoman Empire Shia population that had been discriminated against for decades and centuries. So you're right from that perspective, that at the time, it is true, they were very poor. But admirably, in the last century, the community has developed a large middle class due to educational opportunities, due to immigration to Africa, among other places. The Shia of Lebanon travel a lot to Africa and do very, very well in specific African countries. So currently, this idea of the poor Shia is no longer necessarily relevant. That being said, of course, there are poor Shia, just as there are poor Sunni, poor Christians, what have you. They are Lebanese. Now, it depends on where what your economic theories would lead you. You could say, well, the state should do something about it, or the state should not do something about it. Let the economy do something about it. I would lean more onto, no, the state should care about some redistribution. I believe in some redistributionary role for the state, including for the Shia citizens. But that's for the state to do, not, in my mind at least, that's not the job of a foreign-supported and foreign-funded militia to do in Lebanon. So yes, there are still people who are suffering. Some of them are Shia. If the Lebanese economy picks up, and by the way, Lebanon is such a small country, it does not need like billions and billions of dollars, and it does not need like 55 years for it to pick up. If Lebanon gets like 10, 15 years of peace, and some money comes to the country, and the diaspora, which is doing typically very well, some of it is ready to come back to the country, and anyway, a lot of money is being sent to the country. That would be enough for the state, a different one than the current state, if we have a better political class, to take care of the poor of Lebanon, including the Shia poor of Lebanon. One last thing I would like to pinpoint. I mentioned it in my talk, the Faustian deal. Hezbollah wanted that whoever was president or prime minister, what have you, just to let them have their weapons, right? In exchange, they allowed these president and prime ministers and what have you to steal the country. I call it Grand Theft Lebanon. And who suffers when a country is being robbed? The poor people, including the Shia poor people. So did Hezbollah really protect the poor Shia, or did he help the ultimate enemies of the poor Shia, the corrupt politicians of Lebanon, make the poor Shia even more poor? That's something to think about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Tanya. I'm a senior at Pitzer studying American Studies, but I'm curious about what you think about Iran, especially since the weakening of Iran following the failure of Hezbollah and the Assad regime. do you foresee the fall of the Islamic Republic? And if so, what do you think is the biggest threat to the Islamic Republic?
Yes, that's another terrific question. You know, I have a PhD in political science. I don't have a crystal ball allowing me so perhaps you think too much of me here. But when I think about Iran, the last decade of the Soviet Union comes to my mind in the sense that I think of a country of a regime that is bankrupt ideologically, that has failed economically, and that is clearly hated by a majority of the population. This is how I see Iran currently. The Iranian currency has lost maybe 80%. So I spoke about the Lebanese currency losing 95% of its value. The Iranian currency is not doing much better. The economy is collapsing. Perhaps you know there are blackouts in a country so rich with gas and oil and what have you. They should at least have electricity. They are shutting down schools and universities and public administrations because they cannot run these administrations. And the Lebanese, the Iranian president who died, I mean, that's because the helicopter is was made like what, 50, 60 years ago? That's an infrastructure that is crumbling. So, I mean, again, how do authoritarian regimes crumble? Right? Or when do they crumble? If they are still ideologically legitimate, typically they can sustain themselves. I don't see the Saudi regime as being ideologically legitimate. However, there's a large Saudi middle class. People are doing well, so a regime can stay, right? But if you're not doing well economically, if ideologically you are bankrupt, then what is left is the apparatus of the coercive apparatus, right? Iran is not doing well economically, but Khamenei still has enough money to pay the army, pay the Pasdaran, pay the coercive apparatus. Should something happen in that regard, and a break in the loyalty of the Revolutionary Guard, of the Pasdaran, then hey, things could happen in Iran, and I don't think that's going to. Let me end on this note. The Iranian regime began in 1979, right? That's what, 46 years ago. I doubt the Iranian regime has another 46 years. I doubt it has another 20 years. Sometimes I doubt, I read about Iran as much as I can. I'm obsessed with that country. I began learning Persian, by the way, when I was in grad school. I don't think the regime has another 10 years. So I think Iran, if we're talking about spectacular changes in the Middle East, we've seen what happened to Syria. Will Iran be next? That's very possible for the reasons I just pinpointed.
I hope so, because I want to go back.
I hope so too. I want to visit. I want to see Asfahan. I hear beautiful things about Asfahan. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nandini Patro. I'm a first year at CMC. Thank you for coming to this talk.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I was thinking about how you were saying that it would be a good idea for Lebanon to make like a peace treaty with Israel and for U.S. help and like focus and intervention. I'm in a Middle East class myself right now in history, and we were learning about how the Ottoman Empire has led to the rise of like Arab nationalism and Islamic nationalism. And I think we can see tons of examples afterwards of like how imperialist forces have led to negative nationalist forces that have even led to violence before. So I was thinking about like the practicality and your opinions about the cooperation of the people in Lebanon in the U.S., if that were to happen in the U.S. focusing on Lebanon.
Yeah. First of all, imperialist forces are not always, wreaking havoc in the world. I mentioned the American University of Beirut, right? That's a fruit of imperial intervention in the Middle East. Tens of thousands of people throughout the last century have become doctors, lawyers, engineers, what have you, because of the American University of Beirut, which is itself a product of Protestant missionaries, which you can call themselves a product of imperial intervention. So this notion of whatever the imperialists do is by definition evil, that's a notion that we need to, I find very, very problematic, and I profoundly disagree with. I would also say when the so-called imperialist retreat, void does not exist, right? Who has filled the void, for instance? When America left Lebanon in 1983, who filled the void? The Islamic Republic of Iran, right? I would take the Americans anytime over Khomeini and Khamenei, and I would say a majority of Lebanese would do the same. So this idea of America bad, imperialism bad, I don't know, so the West is bad or evil, the East is good. I think that's a very problematic notion. And again, I fundamentally disagree with. That being said, to go back to your specific question about America intervening to push for peace, a majority of the Lebanese population would want that. I mean, people are tired of war. People are tired of bloodshed. People understand you cannot wipe Israel off the map. I mean, that illusion is long gone. I think that illusion was gone in 1967, like 50 years ago. And I think every single regime or organization that has used the term or used the ideology did not use the ideology because actually they believe that they can wipe Israel off the map. They use it to maintain themselves in power. So essentially, that ideology turned against the Palestinians in the case of Palestine, against the Lebanese in the case of Lebanon, against the Syrians in the case. So let me give you one example. Why did officially the Assad regime prevent politics, kill politics for 50 years? Officially, because politics are divided and we are too busy wiping Israel off the map, right? So we cannot have democracy, we cannot have pluralism, etc., because that will take us from our sacred goal fight against Israel. Well, that was nonsense, because everybody understood that what the regime was about was not fighting Israel, but keeping power in Syria. The same for Lebanon. Everybody knew Hezbollah could not defeat Israel. Why would Hezbollah still clamoring that he's going to defeat Israel? Because essentially that was his way or its way to legitimize its mainmise, its control over Lebanon. So what the majority of the Lebanese want is to stop the charade. Israel is here to stay, so Israel is our neighbor, right? That's not, the Israelis are not going to pick up and leave, right? If the Israelis are going to be there, and if are going to be there, we have really two choices: or fight one another for another 100 years, or sign a peace treaty. And the majority of the Lebanese, I would say, want the other choice. But Hezbollah, as I said, is weakened but not completely defeated. Iran is still there. So you would need some pushback against that for that to happen. And this is where America would come in. And should America do that, that would be a good imperialist intervention in Lebanon. By the way, I think I mentioned this also in my talk. In 1958, Eisenhower sent 10,000 Marines to Beirut. To do what? By that time, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, so Egypt, which was a pro-Soviet country at the time, had swallowed Syria. And it appeared that Gamal Abdel Nasser and Egypt was going to swallow Lebanon as well. That would have made Lebanon, had that happened, a small part of an autocracy run by a military guy, a military dictator, who, icing on the cake, is an ally of the Soviet. That did not happen because the Marines went to Lebanon, and I'm glad they did. So not every single time America does something in the Middle East, or the imperialists, or the French, or the UK, what have you, it's necessarily something to be alarmed about, irrespective of what people are being taught on campuses, on various campuses. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Professor.
Thank you so much. Thank you.